Something pretty scary happened to me at the LAX airport, and I didn't realize the gravity of it until this morning. Following my gut instinct saved our lives. My husband and I were in California seeing my grandma and grandpa at the time. We were waiting for a Lyft driver to come and pick us up and take us to my grandpa's house, when a man with a Lyft sticker pulled up to where we were and told us that he was ready for new riders and that he could take us now, and when we were in the car to just add that we were on his route. I started to consider it as he was just right there, and he was pretty nice. He even took the phone right out of my hands to try and cancel the Lyft that we had already ordered. But it seemed really weird to me, and my gut instinct was absolutely screaming not to go. He then got upset and said that we wasted his time. Big eye roll, and then he got in his car and drove away. As he did, I decided to take a photo of his license plate. I immediately sent an email to Lyft. They did an investigation, and this morning I got an email that said that license plate has never been used in their system, and that they're really happy I didn't end up going with the man. There's been similar things in Los Angeles just like this that have gotten people killed, and like I said at the beginning of the story, my gut instinct probably saved our lives. I mentioned in a previous post that for a good week my car was in the shop getting fixed. This resulted in me lifting just about everywhere and having to deal with a lot of weirdos. Now, I already thought that the last Lyft driver I had was already pretty bad, but this guy takes the creepy cake. I had just finished my shift and this dude picks me up by the name of Angel. But anyways, as I get into the back seat of his car, he pulls up my Lyft photo and then zooms in on it repeatedly before he stares at me in the rearview mirror.
"This is you?"
He asks. Yeah.
No way. How old are you? You look so cute. How old are you?
As he says this, he keeps pulling up my Lyft photo. I'm 22.
What? How old were you when you took this photo? You look like a child. You're so cute. Wow.
In my head, I was just like, 2 years ago, get off my butt. But instead, I didn't really answer and just kind of brushed him off. He continues driving, all the while staring at me whenever he can. We get to a red light and he changes the radio station from Katy Perry to the Spanish channels. I instantly groan inside because I'm mixed race and this is getting pretty old for me. A lot of people do this thing to me where they try and see if I can speak their language or know enough about their culture, as if to approve me or something.
You speak Spanish? You know this song? This is real Spanish music. You should give it a listen.
No, I don't speak Spanish, thanks.
Do you know any Spanish artists?
No, I don't.
Well, that's okay. Even if you don't speak Spanish, you'll do good on your honeymoon.
I ask what he means by that, and he doesn't really give me an answer. Instead, he asks what my work schedule's like, how many days a week I work, is it always at that location, do I live alone, etc. I answer him instead in half-truths, saying, oh, I don't have a schedule yet or a fixed location as I'm training between locations. That way he can't really find me or know my routine at all. He just nods and hums, all the while still just glancing at me right in the mirror. A car cuts him off and then he honks before stating loudly,
Move! Move! I have a really pretty girl in the backseat of my car.
I tell him to let me out of the corner and he says no, that he'll take me to my door. Because I don't want it to be too obvious that I'm freaked out, I tell him to go up to these random townhouses which are all connected by a path and park. He lets me out at the front of some random house and I move behind it and then wait until he drives off before I zigzag around all of these pathways. I mean hell. I almost got lost myself by walking around all these weird pathways until I finally found myself home. I almost got lost by walking around all these weird pathways until I finally found myself home. So yeah, Angel, let's definitely not encounter each other again. Okay, so this happened about a year ago. I'm in a long-distance relationship and I often fly to visit. I didn't have a ride arranged to come and pick me up, so I usually just use a Lyft or Uber to get to and from the airport. This particular ride started off fine. It was the guy from Haiti and he had a very thick accent that was often hard to understand. The beginning of the ride was just him making small talk like most drivers do. Where are you flying from? Are you in college? Do you have family here? And so on. We get on the freeway and there's a lot of traffic. I had a layover flight and of course all of the outlets were in use, so I couldn't charge my phone. I'm really hoping that this traffic lightens up soon because I really need to keep in contact with the people I'm going to be staying with. Of course, with my luck, the app crashes and then says, "You have arrived," while we're literally in the middle of the freeway near no houses at all. I get kind of annoyed and the driver says that he'll pull over at this Walmart that's nearby so we can try and figure out what's wrong. Apparently he had a very old phone and it wasn't giving proper directions, so I said that we could use mine but that I needed to charge it. He asked me to sit up front so that it was easier, and I thought nothing of it, so I decided to go up front. He tells me that he'll take me the rest of the way for free without using the Lyft app. I put the address in my phone and we're back on our way. As we're pulling out of the Walmart parking lot, he then decides to ask me how old I am. I told him that I'd just turned 18, and that's when things got kinda weird. He seemed to lighten up at how young I was, which was a bit odd, but whatever. He then asked me a series of questions like,
Why don't you live here? You should move here. You should go to college here, so why don't you? I'm a doctor and Lyft is just a side job for me, so I have a lot of money.
This man was at least in his mid-40s. I told him that I had no money to just randomly move states and start college, seeing as I had just become a legal adult. He then told me,
I can take care of you. I'll buy you a little apartment and a nice car, and I can take you out and pay for your college.
I thought that he was joking, so I kinda just awkwardly laughed and then said, That's okay, you don't need to do that. But he just kept insisting on it, and I was starting to get really creeped out. I really didn't want to jump to conclusions. I thought that maybe he's just not sure how to hold proper conversations since he's foreign or something. About 20 minutes later, we're about 5 minutes away from my destination. My phone kept doing that annoying thing where it's charging then not charging that phones do whenever the charger wires are loose. I had this phone for a really long time, so it did this sometimes. And apparently it hadn't really been charging much at all, and then it died. Since we were so close to the destination though, I told him that I knew the rest of the way, but I'd tell him to turn right and he'd say okay and then purposely turn left or keep going straight. Literally anything but what I told him to do. Now we're lost because he's literally ignoring everything I'm saying and playing it off as some sort of an accident, and I'm not super familiar with the entire area. I really only knew a small portion of the streets. He tells me that he lives nearby, and I start getting really scared because I think he's going to kidnap me or something. I then let out a single tear. I tell myself to keep it together because usually in the movies, whenever they see fear, they usually get mad or something. So I try really hard to try and make it seem like I'm not totally losing my crap. He finally turns back around, and when we're almost there again, he then starts purposely going the wrong way yet again. At this point, I got my phone to about 5%. He reaches over while at a red light, grabs my phone, and then he rates himself 5 stars on Lyft and also friends me on Facebook. He also puts his phone number in my phone and tells me to call him if I ever need anything and that we should go out sometime. I give a little fake smile so he doesn't know that I'm about to crap myself from all of the fear. I eventually get so fed up that I just jump out at another red light and then tell him, "Thanks, but you're really scaring me. Bye." I then call my boyfriend on my 5% battery life and I tell him where I am because I'm really scared and I need him to pick me up. The Lyft driver is now shouting out the window for me to get back in the car, but there's no way in hell I was going back in there to be some man's sugar baby and was also a total stranger. I then decide to go somewhere with a lot of people and wait for my boyfriend. Now, this whole ordeal actually made the ride last about 2.5 hours, and it should have only taken about 45 minutes even with all of the traffic. Later I called Lyft and I told them everything. He was supposedly fired, so I guess that's good. Anyway, to the random Lyft driver looking for a young sugar baby to try and kidnap, if you happen to see me again whenever I visit, please just stay away from me. To give a bit of background, I'm a female and I drive for Lyft at night. I'm on the shorter side at about 5'4" tall, and I've been driving for nearly 6 months. I tend to drive downtown Denver, especially on weekends when there's a lot of money to make. In this time, I've only had a couple of truly scary encounters. I drive about 7 nights a week and at least a couple of hours at night. The first scary story started out pretty normal enough for pretty late at night. I had just dropped off a passenger in Aurora, and I was marking my way back towards Market Street since the bars hadn't closed yet. I get a pickup that's on the way. It's a nice enough area that I don't really feel uncomfortable, but anyone who knows Aurora, Colorado knows that it's not really the best area, even with a few nice areas. A couple of guys hop in the car. One in front and one in the back, and both have hoodies on and are carrying backpacks. But this is Colorado, and it's almost 1:30 in the morning, so it's not that odd. Where it gets odd is after they get in. I give my normal greeting, but they completely ignore me. They shove their backpacks onto the floor, and then they pull their hoods up while shielding their faces from the windows with their hands. I was instantly uncomfortable, and I could feel that something was off. It was only about a 10-minute drive, and we were in a secluded area, so I decided the safest thing I could do was just complete the ride. I could then feel my fight or flight instinct totally kicking in. Within about a minute, I had then decided that if they were going to try anything, I was going to crash my car. Neither one had put on a seatbelt, so I figured that would probably be my best chance. Once we arrived at the location that they wanted to be dropped off at, I could just tell it wasn't a good area. Bars on the windows, trash all over the place, and there were a lot of cars in disrepair. They get out of the car but don't shut my doors, then start whispering to each other, all the while glancing at me. One of them has his hand in his pocket and he's fidgeting with something. At this point, I've totally had enough and step on the gas, driving off with all of the doors open. I drive for a couple of miles until I get to a gas station with lights and people, before I stopped to properly close the doors. I called it a night and I headed home to cuddle my toddler and my husband before having a good cry in the safety of my own bed. I have absolutely no idea what they were planning, but I do know that I was absolutely terrified from the moment they pulled their hoods up to the moment I drove off with my doors open. The second story takes place a couple of weeks after the first. I had sworn off all pickups in Aurora and the shady parts along with Colfax at night. I would still drop people off there, but I would also turn my app off and then leave the area whenever I was done. I was downtown as usual for a Saturday night and the bars were closing. I get a shared ride, which can be very good at bar closing. Now, the thing about shared rides is you can't request more than 2 seats, leaving room for 2 more people. I have on multiple occasions had a full car with these types of rides. I get to the person, then unlock my doors as normal, and then gets in about 3 people. Okay, small problem. I'm polite and I tell them that I can't give them a ride with 3 people, so they're going to have to order a different Lyft. This is where this one turns.
I don't want to have to pay more money.
I'm really sorry, but either one of you has to get out or all of you do, and you need to order a different ride. This is a shared ride, and that means I could get 2 more passengers and they need seats. With shared rides, you're only allowed to book 2 seats for 2 passengers.
Well, I'm not going to pay more money, so you can just ignore the other rides and take us home.
At this point, he became really aggressive and he then started putting his finger right in my face. Maybe I should have been more scared, only this is Market Street at bar close and it's really packed. There are drunk people just about everywhere, and where there are drunk people, there's also cops. I roll down my window as he continues to tell me what I'm going to do and then starts threatening me. He says that he's going to put me in my place if I don't start driving right now. I made eye contact with a cop and was focusing on getting his attention. Okay, you have a new choice. You can get out, or I can get the cop right there to get you out. Said cop was then making his way over, now seeing that something was wrong. They all jumped out of the car, guy was flipping me off, and then they disappeared into the crowd while still looking for rides. The cop stopped to ask if I was okay, and I gave him a short rundown of everything that happened, and then I thanked him for coming over. I then headed off to my next ride, who was a very polite gentleman. In both cases, I reported them to Lyft so that I wouldn't get paired with them ever again. I always carry pepper spray now for defense. I also have a dash cam that records the interior of my car now. Since the last one, I haven't really had any kind of issues, and hopefully it stays that way. This past summer, for my graduation gift, my mom and grandma took me to Alberta to go watch the Spruce Meadows Masters Tournament. If you don't know what that is, it's basically one of the world's largest horse shows. We flew out there, so we decided to use Uber to get to and from the showgrounds. We don't have Uber where I'm from, but everyone always said that the Uber drivers in the area were really awesome. For the first 3 days, the drivers were great. They picked us up within about 5 minutes or so, and they usually got us there in about 15 minutes tops, and the cars were always really clean and safe. On day 4, we called for an Uber that was about 45 minutes before the time we wanted to be picked up at, which was 9:30 a.m. 10 a.m. rolled around and we thought we'd give it another 10 minutes before calling for a different driver. 10:05-ish and the original driver finally shows up. Now, in his profile, it said that he was driving a 2017 Dodge Journey, but when he got there, it was definitely the right guy, but he was in this old rundown looking beater. My first instinct was to go up to the driver's window and ask him to roll it down. Before I could ask him his name, just to make sure and also ask him what happened to the car that the app said he would be driving, he almost shouted at me in a very angry tone.
"Yes, I'm so-and-so. This is my sister's car. Mine's in the shop. Now ladies, hurry up and get in. I have other rides waiting for me."
I was shocked and already scared at this point. I looked at my mom and grandma and they said to just get in, so I did. I sat in the back with my grandma and my mom sat in the front. We told him where we needed to go and we were on our way. He had taken a different route that he claimed was quicker. On the highway in Calgary, 15 minutes is already pretty fast. 15 to 20 minutes had passed and he had began chatting up my mom in a very flirtatious way the whole ride. He had taken us to the countryside that seemed to be forever away from where we were going. It was actually pretty much the opposite direction, and I asked him if he knew where he was going and if he could get us back onto the highway. He ignored me and just kept driving. About another 10 minutes had passed and I was freaking the heck out. My mom was obviously quite uncomfortable as well, and we were still in the countryside. He then pulls over on the side of the road and we just sat there for about a solid 5 or 6 minutes. At this point, I was really shaking and I had to hold my grandma's hand because I was so scared. The driver turned around and then he put his hand on my leg, but I quickly shifted away. Then he proceeded to look at all 3 of us and then say,
"I'm sorry for the long ride, ladies. I know I've gone out of the way, but you're all just too beautiful for me to let you leave so soon."
Dude, what the heck? I wanted to get out of the car so bad. We all just sat there in silence and all I could really think was, holy crap, this guy's gonna kill us. He had made some more creepy remarks towards me, commenting on how youthful and full of life I am. Really creepy stuff. After sitting there in shock for what felt like hours, my sweet quiet grandma then screamed at him, telling him to turn around and get back on the highway. He finally pulled off the side of the road and then continued on the country road. The whole way there, he kept looking back at me and making a lot of sexual remarks. About an hour and a half later, we finally got to the grounds. I was extremely shaken up by all of this and I was almost in tears. I really wish that we would have just called another Uber. I really hope he doesn't do this to all of his female passengers. It's absolutely disgusting. I'll never be taking a ride share ever again. So to that creepy and awful Uber driver who not only made remarks about me, but also my mom. You literally made me miss like 2 hours of the show, and you also scared me half to death. And also, I gave you 0 stars on the app. Let's never ever meet ever again, and I really hope that Uber fires you in the near future. You really deserve it. It was May 19th of this year and it was my birthday. Me and my mom were just leaving a music gig from a coffee shop, and my mom decided that she'd rather us take a Lyft than take the bus because the buses around here are pretty dangerous at nighttime, especially with all of the drunk people, as well as people with guns and people who start fights. We've never had a bad or weird Lyft or Uber experience before this one. Neither of us were expecting this to happen, especially in the part of the city that we were in, because it's not the bad part of the city or anything. The Lyft came. It didn't come up to the coffee shop though. It kind of parked in the dark street where it was really hard to see. I'm not really sure why he did that, but whatever. We got in the Lyft. Everything seemed fine. We thought we were on our way home, but as it turns out, we could have potentially gotten kidnapped. We both start to notice that he was taking a weird route at first. One that turned him not to even going in the direction of our town. We asked him, "Hey man, where are you going?" and said, "You're supposed to go on this highway over here." He wouldn't respond. He kept his eyes on the road the entire time. My mom even tried to tap him on the shoulder, and still nothing. The only thing that he said to us during the whole ride there was,
"You're going to Andover, right?"
We both simultaneously screamed no at him, and then he laughed, but it wasn't just a chuckle. It was a malicious laugh. He was indeed going to Andover, and that was definitely not the city that we put in for the address. Andover is about 30 miles away from where we live. As he was getting further from our town, we then started to panic even more than we already were. My mom called the police, begging them to send a cop car or to do something to stop this man. They actually said to my mom, "Ma'am, there's not really anything we can do about it." You're kidding me, right? We were being taken somewhere by a freaking stranger, and who knows what his intentions were. The operator must have not been taking my mom seriously, because it didn't make any sense. The operator just kept saying that they couldn't really do anything about what was happening, and they told us to just stay on the line until we were safe. What if we were never safe in the end though? It honestly sounded like they weren't going to do anything unless this man harmed us or said something violent. They just didn't care whatsoever. As we were almost in Andover, the Lyft driver changed his mind and he apparently turned the car around and headed for our town, but he still wasn't speaking to us. Me and my mom are still scared the entire time, even after we arrived at our house. I'm pretty sure I saw a gun that was sticking out of his pocket. Both me and my mom now are very wary about Lyft, Uber, etc., and we always take extra precaution now whenever we use those services. I recommend to anybody else to do the same. Be careful out there. This happened a couple of months ago, December of last year. I had started working a new job in the mall and had to work for most of Boxing Day. I was done at about 10 p.m. and transit seemed to have ended at 7 p.m. I decided to call an Uber and the driver picked me up right in front of the mall. We had a casual conversation during the drive back and he learned about where I worked and how I'm living on my own for the time being since all of my roommates went to their hometowns. Fast forward to the next day at work, around 6 p.m. This driver walks into the store and tries to strike a conversation with me, but I told him I had to get back to work. He also asked if we could hang out later, to which I told him no, and then he left. At the end of that shift, around 10 p.m., I walked out of the store planning to take transit. As soon as I stepped out of the store, the driver immediately pulled up next to me and offered to give me a free ride back home. After going back and forth with me declining it and him saying it's free, I decided to walk away and caught a bus home. I was pretty overwhelmed by the fact that he showed up to my workplace and waited 3 hours until I was done with work to offer me a ride home. I reported this to Uber and they notified me that they suspended the driver, provided me with a full refund, and also gave me a link to provide to the police if I plan on filing a report on this. It was really silly of me to give away information like that to a stranger, but hopefully I don't see that driver ever again. I definitely learned a lesson from this. This happened to me a few years ago. It was New Year's Eve and I had just been out in the city to celebrate with 3 of my closest friends. At the end of the evening, when we were all really exhausted and ready for bed, one of our friends traveled to her house near the club while the others made the hour-long trek back to our home suburb. There were 3 of us together, all females. The trip to our suburb typically involved a 45-minute long bus trip, then an Uber or taxi to our houses. I've lived in that area my entire life, and I'm very familiar with the most convenient way to get to and from my house. On this particular evening, we got off the bus and then I booked an Uber with my phone. It was around 4 a.m., so as you can imagine, our remote little town had very little road traffic at this time. A car pulls up at the bus stop, and this was the first car that we'd seen since arriving, and there was no one else around except for us, so we assumed it was our ride, then got in. Our Uber driver was a Russian man with a very thick accent, although he didn't really speak a lot. Immediately I noticed that he was taking us in the wrong direction of my house, but I figured it's fine. Sometimes the GPS just takes drivers on different routes, so I just brushed off the thought. Then about 10 minutes later, I get a text that my Uber driver's arriving at my pickup destination. Really angry that I was way too tired or intoxicated to remember the message that you usually receive before your ride pulls up, but also terrified that I may have gotten my 2 best friends and myself into a vehicle with a man that we didn't know at all. My actual Uber driver then tried to call me, presumably to find out where we were, but I ignored the call, not wanting to alert the man who had actually picked us up. At that point, I still hadn't said anything about any of this to my best friends, but I asked the driver if he'll stop at a service station so that I could grab a drink of water before we continued the journey, because I made the excuse that I felt sick. He then questioned me.
We aren't that far from your destination now.
But I insisted, so he agreed. When we arrived at the service station, I desperately asked all of my friends to get out of the car with me, and they obliged. I explained the situation to them, and we all agreed to tell the driver that we were going to walk to a friend's house that was nearby, and to not worry about the rest of the trip. He seemed frustrated, and he absolutely insisted to take us, but we refused to get back in the car. We ended up just getting a cab to get us back home from there. So, to the Uber driver who may have not actually even been an Uber driver, definitely don't pick us up again. It's really great to see that Uber now warns users to always check the license plate before getting into a car, but my story happened about a year before that was put in place. A couple of friends and I were spending New Year's Eve at a house party. The new year hit, the party was winding down, and my friend ordered an Uber. Mind you, all 4 of my companions were some combination of pissed drunk or baked out of their minds. I was decently buzzed, but by far the most sober of the group. I assumed the role of mom friend and got the rest of the group to the street to wait for the car. It was absolutely freezing, pitch black, and the street was completely empty. A car pulled up and my friend announced that it was our Uber, so everyone had started to make their way over to it. Out of nowhere, I get this really sick feeling in my gut. My lizard brain then kicks into overdrive and tells me to get the hell away from that car. That's when I realized that the car was missing an Uber sticker. Since my friend was way too drunk to care, I grabbed her phone to check the license plate. This wasn't our Uber. I realized at the same moment that my friend had walked over to the driver's side window to ask if this was the Uber for Sarah, and he then told her that he was. I yelled to her that this was the wrong car, but she was too gone to care. But he says he's our driver. She slurred. I channeled my inner mom and then yelled to her that this was not our driver and that the car had the wrong license plate. Instead of walking away from the car, she asked him why the license plate was different if he was actually here for Sarah. And I kid you not, this idiot actually tells her that he put the wrong license plate on the car this morning, and she was so drunk that she actually believed him and almost opened the door to get inside. I yell at her to get the heck away from the car right now because that is not our driver. Finally, she starts to walk away, but the driver grabs her arm and tries to force her in. The friend next to Sarah then pulls her away, but the guy looked visibly unhinged at this point and actually ordered her to get in the car. The first thing I could think to do was to take my phone out, start filming the car, and then yell, "Hey dickhead, I'm filming you." This got his attention real good, and he was down the street before I could even say another word. About a second goes by and the real Uber finally shows up. We were all spooked, but they were drunk, tired, and ready to let it go just to keep the good vibe going. All I could think of was some poor drunk girl leaving a party alone and forgetting to check the license plate. So as the only one who wanted to do something and also the only one under 21, I decided to call the cops. Not great in hindsight, but I'd rather get busted for being just shy of 21 and kinda buzzed than let someone get possibly kidnapped and whatever else. It all turned out just fine, and they actually caught the guy before he could ever find another victim. But we never found out what his motive was or what happened after that. The best part of the entire ordeal, though, was the one guy in our group and his reaction. I've known him since kindergarten, and he's one of the smartest people I know, but he was so drunk that he actually believed the guy was just a nice dude trying to help us out. He tried to convince me not to call the cops because it would only ruin the guy's night, and because it was New Year's, the guy should have fun. He still absolutely denies this ever happened. In conclusion, always check your Uber's license plate, and I really mean always.